What's the biggest problem on Earth right now? I would say it is our limited philosophical views, our limited understanding of existence, what existence is and what it can be, our cosmological perspectives, our worldviews are very highly limited. And this leads to our behavior and our, kind of toxic mindsets, if you will, and our ideas of separation and disconnection, which leads to the behavior of treating each other poorly and treating nature poorly, all stemming from our limited philosophical views. So at one point, institutionalized religions had a strong hold on certain philosophical views, and a very strong overarching controlling factor over people's way of thinking and their whole cosmological picture and their understanding of existence. These are stemming from governmental and religious institutions that were perhaps using this kind of understanding to control people and their cosmological perspectives so that they could control their behavior and have power and control over them. Okay. And so, those kind of controlling forces still do exist, but they don't nearly have the power and control that they once had, right? Now, there is more of a scientific factor here that actually does control a lot of ways people think. And so there are different competing, I don't have a problem with science itself. We can learn a lot from doing the scientific method of inquiry, and we can clearly, it works in terms of helping us learn and make causal predictions about the nature of events and helps us be able to build and understand our world better. Clearly, we've done a great job with this sort of scientific method of inquiry and helping us advance in the ways that it has. Clearly, yes. But when it comes to a whole cosmological framework, a whole philosophical picture on the nature of all existence, the ideas there are different competing ideas within science. And the one that is kind of leading in the kind of academic, kind of mainstream institutionalized narrative is one particular view. And sometimes people think that is the scientific view, but no. It is just one particular interpretation and one particular cosmological model made from scientific investigation. But it is not the only cosmological model made from scientific investigation. And so the leading theories, the leading paradigm of understanding, I have found also in the mainstream scientific institutions, the mainstream paradigm, which is really a philosophical picture, to be highly limited as well. Also, perhaps to have that same overarching power and control. And the most important aspect of all of it is its interpretation of consciousness. And so, in the mainstream paradigm, it is a philosophical paradigm of reductive physicalism, has this understanding that consciousness is some byproduct of the brain. It is an epiphenomenon of the brain to which it has no causal efficacy of its own, which you are more like a passive observer of your reality rather than an active participant. And that is a cosmological picture. The idea of physicalism, and particularly reductive physicalism, that all causation is happening through a physical level, and that there is no sort of agency, no actual causation of consciousness, because they don't see how consciousness can have that causal ability in its reality, because all causation comes from that physical level, and that consciousness is something like an illusion of the brain without its actual causal role. So, that's why they don't believe in free will and all that stuff. Okay, because they see consciousness as just being states of neuronal computation. And that's all there is to it. And so it's the neurons that dictate the consciousness in a sort of only a bottom-up causation factor. And so this is a highly limited view as well. And this isn't, there's other competing scientific hypotheses, theories here that do not support that view. So that is not the view of science, that is a view of science. It's important to understand the difference, and there's different interpretations, particularly when you get into like the quantum mechanics on different understandings of consciousness, as sort like a non-local consciousness, which is, that consciousness is not contained within space and time in that manner. And so, there's different views, but the one that's leading is a highly limited, a highly dogmatic view. The one that is being, taught in schools as the leading theory. Just like it used to be taught in schools when they were more controlled by religious forces, that this is our theory of existence. This is what we say. God did, you have to obey God and, the fear of God and all that. And they use that as the control over the people. Well, what I'm saying is, it's the same thing they're doing now with this particular paradigm of reductive physicalism as a philosophical paradigm overarching in control of what they teach as a scientific picture. Okay? It's the same thing. It's all to limit our conceptualization of existence. That's the whole point of it. It's all to limit our cosmological picture, to keep us confined in a limited view of the nature of reality. That's what it serves. And it's all stemming through overarching controlling forces that want to limit our understanding of existence for their power and control means. And why they're doing this? Well, I just made another video called Source of Corruption. You can check that out where I go into a lot of detail over all this. And I think it stems back to certain extraterrestrial beings that want to keep us away from this sort of knowledge and want to kind of keep us working for them and don't want us to have that, don't want us to fully realize our true creative potential. And then perhaps there are also some lower dimensional forces, perhaps some like demonic entities, involved here that are on their own path of control over us and want to keep us and perhaps feed off of us and keep us in this kind of lower consciousness. And they want to keep us down and keep us in this limited perspective of existence. But that's what I'm saying. That's our whole problem here, is we're in a limited conception of existence. But we don't have to listen to them. So yes, I do think these controlling factors are there, and they are purposely trying to lead people into a limited conception of existence. But we can break out of that and just not listen to them. Just like, you just don't have to listen to your church when they tell you things. It's not like the church has all the power and control over everything and, there's some big conspiracy. That's all, there is a giant conspiracy, but you're not trapped in it. You see, it just wants to limit your mind into a smaller conception of existence, but you can expand your mind and realize there is more. So you're not trapped in some reality, in some simulation. Maybe. But, I'm saying you're not trapped in some simulation where you can't escape. It's all a mental construct. It's all just a brainwashing indoctrination into a limited view of existence. And that's our problem here, is we have limited views of existence and we're trapped and brainwashed into those. And so, we can break out of that, and these limited views of existence, that's what causes our mindsets of power, control, and domination, because of that mindset of separation. Because we've lost that connection and that real spiritual connection, the connection with nature, the connection with each other, that we're all this one thing, And so, that's to say it is actually all spiritual, and then the religions try to have control over the spiritual narrative and control all that. And it all goes back to that actual spiritual understanding and the higher dimensions of consciousness. And that's what it really all comes down to, and that we're trying to be kept away from this higher understanding and higher kind of density dimension of consciousness and kept in this lower understanding of reality. Because something doesn't want us to reach those higher densities of consciousness. And humanity was once there, and that's where all the spiritual traditions came from. And they don't want us to get back there. But too bad for them, because I think we will. And so, the real corruption, the real problems in this world that we as humanity face are our limited conceptions of existence. And we need to expand our conception of existence, expand our cosmological picture, expand our understandings of consciousness and the role consciousness plays in its environment to be able to further realize our connection to each other and to live more harmoniously with each other. That's the key. And, maybe it's not coming from these overarching forces that are using it for power and control. I mean, certainly they are there, and their pictures of the reality are limited, so I don't think it's much of a stretch to say. But maybe they're not doing it on purpose, and they're just stupid teaching us, But either way, it's wrong, and we want to break out of that. So, whether it's done on purpose by aliens or not, it's still an issue. And we need to expand our understanding of existence and consciousness and break away from what right now I think is the bigger issue for people is the paradigm of philosophy in the mainstream community of what is masquerades as the scientific understanding, which is really just one particular scientific interpretation, which is probably the worst one there is. So, it's as if it's just, this is what science says, it's your neurons, and those are what causes your consciousness, and there's no free will because science says. No. That's one particular interpretation of science, but that's just one particular dogmatic and limited view. That is not what science says. No. That is what they want you to believe, science says. That is what they want to indoctrinate you and brainwash you into believing. Or it's just because they're so stupid and they're just teaching each other that, and they all just believe it because they're too stupid to realize how dumb it is. It's both, really, yeah. It's not like every teacher's in on this. No, of course not. They're just brainwashed, and they're teaching each other this, teaching their students that, who teach their students that, and whatnot, just like the religions work. They're all teaching, who's really in on it, where's it coming from, up top, tippy top, I don't know who's really controlling it, but at some point, they created, Council of Nicaea, Constantine, kind of manipulated the text and, put it all together, and, to have a whole controlling, manipulated, limited cosmological picture. But they're not all in on it. They're just all teaching each other this because they're too stupid to break out of that limited perspective. And that's the same thing that's happening today in our mainstream academic community. It's all just people teaching each other limited conceptions, and they're just not smart enough to realize how dumb it is. But, we will eventually, and that's going to be the big step for us to make as a society, is to break out of the idea of reductive physicalism and further develop the science that is not limited in that manner, that understands consciousness and the role consciousness plays in this feedback loop system and the holographic fractal network. See, the stuff's already out there. Look into Nassim Haramein Resonance Science Foundation. They're the most sophisticated understanding of this that I have found by far, and this is really good stuff. I would recommend you look into this, and it's just as much science as anything else, guys. Just because it's not taught in schools yet doesn't mean it's not science. It's just